Right, croeso pawb. Croeso I pwyllgor Cymdeithasau. Gwasanaethau Democrataidd, ail o Tachwedd 2020. Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of Democratic Services Committee on the 2nd of November 2020. I'm Councillor Del Morgan and I'm the chair of the committee. And just to make you all aware, today's meeting will be and is being recorded. I don't see any members of the press or public. If they do join later, I'll be asking them to listen, observe, but not speak and participate. Can I remind you all, please, to switch your phones to silent for the duration of the meeting? In addition, can I refer you to the protocols for remote meetings, which have been previously circulated? So, namely, your microphones should be switched to mute unless you're speaking. Should you wish to ask a question or make a comment, can you please indicate either via the chat function or by raising your electronic hand via Teams? I will assume that you have all read the paperwork before us today prior to the meeting. Please only use the chat function to indicate if you wish to speak as an alternative to the electronic hand function, or of course to raise any technical issues. When asking a question, can you please indicate which page number you're referring to? I tend to go off the page numbers on the bottom center of each page. When speaking, please introduce yourself. And as you can see, the first item on the agenda is to do a roll call. So I will now ask, and it's going to be Stacey, not Chloe, from Democratic Services to take us through this. Stacey?
Thank you, Chair. So you're present, Councillor Del Morgan. Councillor Aubrey?
Present.
Councillor Harvey? Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, present.
Councillor Hurley?
Present.
Councillor Miller?
Present.
Councillor Percy?
Present.
Councillor Renkes?
Present.
Councillor Llewellyn?
Yes, present, thanks, Stacey.
Councillor Richards?
Presennol, present.
Councillor Hunt?
I'm here.
Councillor Latham?
Yeah, present, Stace.
Thank you. And are there any members that I've missed? No, thank you. On to officers. Karen Jones?
Present.
Karen Furlow-Harris?
Present.
Ray Griffiths?
Present.
Spencer Blewett?
Present.
And Chloe Plowman?
Present.
Are there any officers that I've missed? Thank you. The roll call's complete, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr, Stacey, thank you. Okay, the next item, item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any? I see none. So on to item 3. Item 3, the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 3rd of March 2020, pages 3 to 8. Members, I'll call the pages firstly just for accuracy and for acceptance. So page 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, with 8 being blank. If you're all happy to accept those minutes. Okay, thank you. I see general agreement, no dissent there. So can I just go back and take them page by page in case any members might have matters to arise that aren't covered by the rest of the agenda. So on page 3, four, 5.
Chair, Craig
Page 5.
Griffith got his hands up. Craig
Yeah.
Griffith.
Oh, right.
Craig Griffith got his hand up.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Yes, I see, Craig. I was going to bring you in, Craig. If it's in relation to the IRPW claims.
Yeah. Yes, Chair. That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Go on then, if you would.
Oh, okay, thank you, Chair. Just to clarify one particular point for members, which I think was raised last time, there was a concern around GDPR with regards to the IRPW when it comes to carers allowance ultimately being claimed. Just to confirm for members that although it would be confirmed on the record if you were claiming a carers allowance that you were in receipt of that particular sum, the details and the reasoning why you were claiming it would not be made public in that point forward. So just to provide a little bit of clarification to members on that point. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Craig. Okay, all members happy with that explanation. So we are back to 5, 6, and 7. I'm not sure, members, whether there's any other part of the agenda where you might want to say anything, but there are a few of you piloting Office 365. Just wanted to check that that piloting is going on smoothly and effectively. Anything to raise, or those of you are happy with it? Steve? On mute, Steve. Stephen, I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Sorry.
Okay.
I updated my app, the raised hand facility now, which everybody be pleased about. So I missed my mic then, sorry. Yeah, I was one with Sean and Stefan, God rest his soul. It's working really well, and I think it's been brought up in various meetings since we trialed it. A lot of members have approached me, Karen, with regards to, I think you're aware of it as well, that they're eager to have it rolled out to all members, and I think it's important they do have this facility, because given where we are, Chair, with coronavirus and these Teams meeting, it's an essential piece of kit. And it's an absolutely fantastic process within the iPad. I couldn't be without it now. And I'm sure Sean will have his own views, but it can do so much more. And one last point, the only issue perhaps may be that certain members would not have the ability to use the full functioning of it. I'm not suggesting that they're not intelligent enough or anything, but I think possible training may be part of the 365 as well. I'm not sure, Karen, if that was mentioned previously anyway, but yeah, I have only admiration for the tool, the kit, the piece of equipment, and it is really important that all members probably get it sooner rather than later. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Steve. And yes, I can confirm the training was discussed as part of it. Before I bring Sean in, Karen, you had your hand up earlier. Do you want to respond to that as well?
Yes, Chair, as you know, we had a meeting with the chairs of the scrutiny committees and vice chairs back a week or so ago, and yourself and Councillor Paddison attended that meeting as well. The issue of IT support for members came up in that meeting. I think that's what Councillor Hunt is referring to. And we did agree from that we would do a survey of the kit that the members have got and whether they've got any difficulties with connectivity. But we also said that we would actually look at this rollout of the 365 product as well as part of that. I have subsequently spoken with Dave Giles about that. So as you can imagine at the moment, the IT team are quite busy. So that is something we will start in the next couple of weeks. But please, can you just bear with us, because it might take a couple of weeks to complete it rather than doing it over a matter of days. But what I would suggest, Chair, is that we have an update in terms of members IT at the next meeting of this committee. And obviously members of the IT reference group may want to consider whether they want to meet in between this meeting and the next meeting of the committee, so we can have a full discussion on it. And hopefully by then we'll have a plan around the rollout and be making some progress with it.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks very much, Karen. That's good. That's very good. So I'm sure members happy with the progress there. Sean?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. To be honest, I haven't really got anything to add after Steve and Karen's comments there, so I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Sean. So there we are. It's going on nicely. Don't think there's anything else in under matters arising or under the minutes. So if we go to item 4, then please. This is the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales, IRPW, the draft annual report for 2021-22, pages 9 to 94. And I believe, Karen, you're going to introduce this briefly.
Yes, Chair, thank you. So this report sets out for members the proposed changes in the IRPW's draft report for 21-22. It's currently out for consultation, and that consultation closes on the 23rd of November. So if you go to the top of page 10, the 3 proposed changes are listed there for you. So the first one is the first proposed change is the £150 per annum increase on the basic salary for elected members. That equates to 1.06%, and that 1.06% then is proposed to be applied to the senior salaries as well. The second proposal, which is perhaps the most major one, is to replace the current 403 monthly cap for the reimbursement of costs of care with a new framework. Now that framework is going to be called the contribution towards the cost of care and personal care, and the cap is going to be replaced with 2 categories. So there's a formal category and there's an informal category. The formal category is where the care is received via formal arrangement, so where the provider is registered with the Care Inspectorate for Wales, and that can be claimed in full. So that's the first category. The second one is informal costs of care. Now they can only be reimbursed up to a maximum rate equivalent to the real living wage at the time the costs are incurred. So the third change contained in the IRPW's draft report is to increase the fees paid for co-opted members by £12. So they are the 3 changes. On the 21st of October, myself and the chair attended a meeting facilitated by the IRPW, and Karen was unable to attend as the head of Democratic Services, where the draft report was discussed. We were joined by colleagues from Bridgend, Swansea, Ceredigion were there as well. The majority of the debate centred around the change to the £403 monthly cap. The chair provided the IRPW with a number of different scenarios, Councillor Morgan, and they said that they'll get back to us because I think there were a few things that they want to consider before finalising the draft, finalising the final report to be issued in April. The recommendations for you today are in the report on page 14. So for members to note the content of the annual report and whether or not determine whether or not they wish to make a response to the consultation.
Thank you, Karen. Can I just add, before I bring in Karen, that indeed it was a useful opportunity to go on Teams to meet with the IRPW panel and officers from the other authorities. It's always an opportunity to hear what the other people are saying. Yeah, there isn't much to add to what Karen said about that meeting, other than there were some detailed scenarios thrown in, including 1 or 2 questions by myself about the costs, the contribution towards the cost of care and so on. It basically boiled down to the fact that they are, for the first time, introducing this 2-tier mechanism, one for formal care to be reimbursed in full, so that an invoice then is paid if you have a professional carer, for example, and then on the other hand the informal care, which comes from I suppose members of extended family and that sort of thing, or friends of family, and then there's this, as Karen said, this talk about reimbursing that to the extent of the living wage. Well, just to say, and I'm not putting my opinion on it, just to say that there is a debate to be had about that. For example, is the IRPW trying to encourage people to claim for informal costs of care? And if so, does that mean we're encouraging people to put in, informal invoices, if that's the right expression, whereas they may not have done previously if they were looking after grandchildren or an older sister or brother? I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying those are the issues they have to think through. And if so, is the living wage the right level to pitch that? So just some thoughts for members to mull around. So before I bring you in, members, Karen, will you got your hand up, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There were just 2 points I wanted to make really on the recommendations from this year's report. The first really relates to the very modest increase they propose into the salary position of members. You know, we've had 10 years of austerity where I think quite rightly members signalled to IRPW that they didn't want to be seeing large increases in member remuneration during that period. And of course, during that period, what we saw was wage restraint and those kind of other measures being deployed more widely across the public sector. But more recently, we have actually seen that change, and we've seen increases in the salaries, for example, of teaching staff, local government workers, civil servants, and also of MPs and MSs themselves. So I was surprised that the IRPW wasn't taking the opportunity in this report to start to address the quite considerable gap that's now developed between the benchmark rate and what members are actually being paid. And I appreciate the members that can be in a difficult position themselves actually making those points. So I am making that point as your head of Democratic Services, and I will be making that point formally back to IRPW, because I would expect this year for them to start to address that balance. When you look at the amount of work that members have needed to take on and responsibilities that members have taken on over the course of this pandemic, and that's on top of many years where you've had to front up very difficult service changes and policy changes in the community, I think that they've actually not cooked that proposal right this time around, is my view. And I don't know whether members themselves want to comment on that, but that's certainly my view that I'll be feeding back to the panel. And the only other point I wanted to make really is the point you were making about the two-tier arrangement around the costs of care, because I'm not satisfied they've given a proper explanation of the thinking behind that. And I think what we are doing, if we're not careful, is substituting one lot of problems with people not taking up that care allowance with a different set of problems. And I'm not convinced under these arrangements that they're necessarily getting at the reasons why members aren't claiming what they're entitled to. So I would like to see more information from the IRPW before they finalise their thinking on that, because I don't understand why we're developing a two-tier system, I have to say. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Karen, and I can confirm that Karen did raise that on your behalf at the Teams meeting with the IRPW. I did stress in that meeting that I was stepping back in a neutral way, as it were, as a member, but the officers were obviously taking that on board, and who knows if the IRPW will look at it. I took part more in the debate about the care allowances and costs and so on. So there we are, members. We've got some time to debate this, so I'll bring you in the order I've seen you. Steve Hunt first, please, and then Sean. Still on mute, Steve.
Forgot about that again.
Okay.
Right, sorry. Karen, you sort of stole my thunder there. I totally agree with everything you have just said. I was going to mention that myself, but no, you're quite right. But Chair, I've been saying for 12 years, and I may as well keep on saying it as well, and maybe this don't go down well with those on higher wages, and I don't know where it goes, and I think Karen's fed up of me saying it probably. But when we look at page 11 and we mentioned the modest 1.06 increase, and then it goes to senior salaries and so forth, I do appreciate, I've been told the same thing over the 12 years as well, that's how how it works. It's always a percentage rise, but it's a lot more money for people already on higher remuneration monies. Due to it's a percentage of what they already have. So I don't know where that goes, whether it goes to that particular remuneration team or Welsh Government to look at a fairer mechanism of pay rises or allowances or whatever you want to call it. So that's one point. The second point is, again, we in this committee and many other committees about equalities and following, Karen again has maintained telling us about if we're going to attract that candidate or that person who wants to be part of a local government and authority, it's going to be open to all. And sometimes there's excellent candidates that might be mums with children, but the history shows, even within this council that I do remember, and I'm not going to name an ex-councillor, but they were embarrassed to claim the allowance because of the media. The media would highlight it in the press, and then there was a lot of flack and stigma associated with it. I don't know, as an authority, it's something that they should have if they need their children looked after and they have no other ways of achieving it. It's there to be claimed, and I don't think there should be any sort of stigma associated with that claimant. I don't know, as an authority, if we've got, Karen, anything that we can say or put in to explain, or right across Wales, really, why this shouldn't be the situation. It may have got better. You may tell me it's a lot better now, but going back, it wasn't. It was really poorly managed, and social media and press really did hammer those in local government or any other associated governments of claiming these allowances, showing what they were having in a way that made them feel very insecure and not able to fulfill their roles. That's what, those are the only 2 points, but what Karen has said, I'm 100% in agreement with. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. Karen, do you want to add anything now, or come in at the end?
Yes, well, I can come in at the end if you like, Chair, make a note of all the points, and then I can come up and respond to all of them at the same time.
There we are. Yes, that would be good. Thanks. Right, Sean next, please. Sean.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to thank you, Karen, for making those comments there at the start. You know, we are in quite a difficult situation as politicians, elected members, you know, in regards to pay. It's not an easy subject to talk about. It's not an easy discussion to have in public. And, you know, the feedback from experience has been quite mixed. I think it's even more challenging now. You know, although the context and the numbers over the last, you know, 10, 12 years are showing shifts in, you know, average pay, the present situation is really difficult. We've got lots of people that have lost their jobs, and it's a hard time to be discussing this issue in that context. But there are, you know, put that one side for a minute, that there are some serious problems still with the public's perception of what we get paid and the reality as well. And when I've had those conversations, some people are quite shocked. They've got an idea, I suppose, in their head about what we've paid, and perhaps ideas around expenses, which have been whipped up from the MP scandals over the years. That just don't correlate with reality. And you know, some people approach me and say, I can't believe that you do this job for this pay. That's just something that I'm not really sure we're going to be able to deal with anytime soon, particularly if the IRPW are going to keep the levels very, very restrained. Thanks very much, Sean. Fair point. So, members, I'm looking at a screen of 10 pictures. I can't see any other hands up. I may not be able to see you all. If you're not using the chat, and if you want to speak now, can you either click your hand or failing all else, unmute yourself for 2 seconds and say me?
Me. Can I just say, I do agree with what Sean has said there. It is a very difficult subject to talk about. And I've had a number of people assuming that as a councillor you're on a high wage, and then others that say that they wouldn't do the job for that money. And at the end of the day, we're all very dedicated with our role. But if you are doing a job, you should be paid accordingly.
Thanks, Angharad. I can't actually see you, but thanks for that. That's absolutely right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
Sorry, Jeremy.
Yes, Jeremy.
If that's okay, yeah. And I say the same. Obviously, I'm still in a position where I'm self-employed and working. So during COVID, the meetings have been less impactful in the fact that we can do them this way. But obviously, when you are attending meetings, I suppose the money it costs you, especially being self-employed, you can see the impact. Although we you know, majority aren't doing it for the money. So yeah, it is, in truth, it does. You do get the favourite one. If I go to the rugby club, you'll have, you know, you're on whatever, this and that or whatever. So they don't realise. But again, they don't appreciate. And again, I appreciate how much more obviously the councillors do, and even the council do, you know, outside of hours and whatever. So yeah, perhaps it is realistic and that it is perhaps brought back in line. So thanks to Karen for sort of bringing it up. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Jeremy. Okay, can't see anybody else. No. In that case, Karen, do you want to come back in and sum up before we go back to page 14?
Just really to say, Chair, that I'll intend to raise that in my own name with the IRPW for the reasons that I sort of set out right at the beginning of this debate. In terms of the scope for a flat increase as well as a percentage increase, which is the point Councillor Hunt was making, if you go back probably about 2 years or so, at that point the IRPW was looking to develop a different model of remuneration, because I think they accept that this particular model is no longer fit for purpose. Since the model was introduced, you've had developments like joint committees, for example, the joint scrutiny arrangements around the city deal. And as we go forward with local government reform, we are going to see more collaborative working, and that brings with it a whole new set of duties, but a whole new set of responsibilities and commitments on members as well. So I think I'll go back and make the general point that within the current model, I don't think that the increases reflect at all the amount of work and the amount of responsibility that members are now taking on. And now is the year to start to actually reduce that gap. But I think they also need to be asked to come forward, even if it's a consultation period in the first instance, with a discussion about what this model should look like in the future, bearing in mind the duties and responsibilities that elected members are going to be asked to shoulder as we go forward over the next number of years. So I think, Chair, probably listening to what the members are about to say, I'll probably make that point back to them as well. On the point of the care allowance, it is still the case, unfortunately, that despite all the work we've all done across Wales, all the encouragement we've given, the ability to, disclose that the payments are being made, but without going into the personal details of individual members. People are very reluctant to claim these allowances, and we see that with the travel allowances as well. Very few members claim the travel allowances unless they're incurring substantial costs because they happen to be a long distance away from the civic centres. So I do think that there's a cultural problem there with the way in which the public perceive these payments, and I'm not sure that there's an easy answer to that, because I think you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, to be honest with you, when you're in public office. I think that what we've got to be prepared to do as a council, and you as political groups as well, is to stand behind members and encourage them to actually claim those entitlements, because we don't want to see our members in financial hardship, and we don't want to see them disenfranchised from being involved in the council's work because they feel reluctant to take those payments up. So maybe that's a discussion, that we need to be perhaps having in different places as well, to make sure that people take what they are entitled to. But unfortunately at the moment, as I say, there are very few people who are actually claiming them. So, there is definitely more to do around all of that. So those are the points, Chair, that I think that I'll be reflecting in my letter, which I'll happily copy to members of the committee. There is also obviously scope for individual members or political groups to make representations to the panel as well. As Karen said, the consultation doesn't end until the 23rd of November. So I suppose, there's strength in numbers sometimes, isn't there, about people making certain points, but I accept that the issue about pay is difficult for you to make. So with that, Chair, there's nothing more I've got to say this afternoon on this point.
Diolch yn fawr, Karen, thank you. Members, just as an aside, it may be of interest to those members in areas with community and town councils. I've read through the IRPW draft in some detail. There are some changes in the explanations and determinations for community and town councillors, which you may find interesting. But coming back to our committee now as county borough members in democratic services, on page 14, colleagues, you'll see two recommendations. One is to note the draft report. Yeah, I'll bring you in a second, Steve. I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page, which is page 14. The two recommendations: to note the draft annual report and to determine whether we as a committee respond to the consultation. And I'll come back to that in a second. Steve, yeah, what do you got? Don't forget to mute.
Apologies then. I thought you was going to the recommendation and you missed my hand. That's all. Sorry.
Although you come in now, carry on. That's
all right. Karen, do you know the link for individual members to make their representation to this? Can Karen send us the link?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
No problem.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, that's okay. I certainly would encourage individual members to make their own comments as well if they would want to. Right. So coming back to the two recommendations, I think the first one is straightforward, that we note their draft annual report. The second one I want to ask, in terms of what we do, because we are asked as a committee to determine whether to respond to the consultation. We've heard that Karen is individually, as an officer, going to write and make those rather sensitive points about the the graphs of increases over the time with inflation. But whether we now, as members of this committee, wish to respond to the consultation, in past years I've recommended that we do, even if it's to simply thank them and note the consultation. But I do feel we should, this is my personal view, that we should ask the IRPW to give more consideration to their thinking behind the reimbursement or contribution towards the cost of care along the lines that we spoke about earlier. So I don't know how members feel about that. I do feel that we should at least make a very brief but formal response to show that we've had this discussion. Members? Steve, your hand is up again, yes? And Mike Harvey?
Yeah.
Steve first.
I haven't got no problem with that. I think it looked good as a Democratic Committee service. We should, as you say, probably respond. But I don't want to duplicate Karen's. It looks as if it's copy and paste. So I'd be looking for some sort of wording from this committee on how you want to respond. So it's not too similar, or, well, of course it would be to a certain degree, but just what are we actually going to say? That's if other members are in agreement. Thank you, Chair. Yes,
I'm bringing other members in now. First of all, I think we are entitled to note the fact that our officers are considering other points. We can actually say that in those simple words. But first of all, then, can we have Mike Harvey?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think where people perhaps are caring for disabled people and need the care allowance, it's awful when they have to think twice, or do I claim it or not, because of the stigma and what the public perception will be of them claiming additional allowances. I think anybody who claims that allowance should be able to do it anonymously, but that's my view. But I go along with what you say, and for you to make the response suitable in respect of that issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Sandra Miller.
Thank you, Chair. I'm of the same opinion. I think we do need to really emphasise that people won't claim the carers allowance if there is going to be a public outcry. They just won't do it. So I think we do really need to hammer home that particular point. It does, in years gone by, there was one member that had to claim, and it was horrendous for them. So I think, the remuneration panel need to have absolutely give that clearer focus, and to try to make it as invisible as possible. Not that anybody is trying to claim something that they're not entitled to, but we need to have it as invisible as possible for them to have confidence in claiming it, because if we don't do that, then they won't claim it, and it'll be, for the main, right? And I would say this, for the main, it'll go against our equality duty, because for the main, it is women that have to look after the children. I'm not saying that it's, and I'm not trying to make light of this, but it is particularly women that have to do much of the caring responsibilities. So I think they need to link that in as well in the equality duty. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Can I check that all the other hands I see on screen are legacy hands? Does anybody want to come back in? Mike Harvey, have you got another point? Oh, okay. I don't see any other hands now then. So can we come back to the recommendations on page 14? Can I take it the first recommendation, number 23, that we note the draft annual report is fine? On the second one then, do I have a general consensus that we do wish to make a brief response to IRPW? And I've got kind of two headings. One is that we want more clarity and more transparency, I think, as Sandra was saying, in terms of the details to help to assist members to have care and support given to them. And the other thing to do with the general increase, I think my personal view is we shouldn't do anything more than note the fact that our officers have got comments that they will relay themselves to the IRPW. If there isn't anything that you feel wrong with that, or if there's nothing else that you want to add, could we take it, members, that we can liaise, myself perhaps, through Stacey to word that more neatly, and perhaps to liaise with Karen in terms of making sure that we don't conflict what message goes through from the officers separately. Does that make sense?
Move, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Anyone against or to abstain? If not, we'll take that as passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Okay, thank you, colleagues. The next item now then is item 5, which is on webcasting and public participation, pages 95 to 110. So, Stacey, please, could you introduce this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the report in front of you is a bit of a trying to gather all the information from where we were back in March, which seems like such a long time ago now, when the work of the committee was really coming to fruition and we were really starting to put some proposals together to take to council for our next steps in the webcasting and public participation proposals, which you'd been asked to put together by council. And then obviously where we are now, all of that work has sort of been superseded and taken over, and all sorts of things happened. So what we've tried to do in this report for committee is to sort of round everything up really and sort of take a gap and a stop and see where we are now. So what you'll see in the report is where we were with the proposals that we were going to be taking to council in terms of webcasting and public participation. We've tried to put in what's happened since the emergency and the pandemic and what we've actually been forced to do and what we are in the position of doing now, which has really sort of taken over a lot of the work that we were planning on webcasting, quite positively in a way. I'm sure some members will think that there's been some positives that have come out of this remote working that has really accelerated a lot of what we were going to be planning on doing anyway. And then sort of taking stock really in relation to particularly the public participation elements and trying to talk a little bit about what those sort of steps might look like going forward. Seeing as we are where we are for the time being, for the considerable foreseeable future, with the remote meetings being the way forward. So the report is sort of a stopgap really of where we are, where we were, and what we're planning on doing for the next steps in terms of webcasting and public participation. So there's a lot of detail in the report because we've tried to put all the information in there for members, because obviously a lot has gone on since that report was going to council. So just a lot of information there for members to take in about where we are and what we're planning on doing. So I don't know if you want to talk through it with members and any questions in particular about where we are. The main thing that we've done in terms of the webcasting is obviously that we had to pause that bit, and instead we are recording and uploading our meeting footage following the meetings. And on page 90, where are we? 100, sorry. There's information there about how quite successful that's been really in terms of viewings and streams and views of the footage. So we really are quite pleased with how we are engaging with the public there, because obviously that's 100 and odd views more than people would have been in the chamber, for example. So that's sort of accelerated our bit about public participation, and we are routinely now publicising what meetings we are holding weekly on our social media and web page platforms to try and engage with members of the public in the business that they can really try and participate in, just try and make it transparent as we can in these circumstances. And members might have noticed in other meetings we have had members of the public and the press in attendance. So, we are sort of making those foundations of making this public participation elements as much as we can in these circumstances, really. And as we look to anticipate the next phase of the Local Government Wales Bill and what we'll be expected to do then, we're just trying to put in some foundation steps now to prepare us for that. So I don't know if Karen or Karen wants to add anything to that, but it's just that's what we were trying to do with the report, Chair.
Thank you very much, Stacey. That's lovely. Karen, you come in first.
Yes, just very briefly, Chair. I think it's fair to say that we have made a lot of progress in terms of the technology aspects of this during the pandemic, because we've been forced into it. And I think we've been pleased as well at how well members have been able to work with Democratic Services and the IT team to make sure that all members of council have been able to take part in those meetings. And one of the things that we have noticed as well is we are actually seeing an increased attendance by members in meetings. So I think particularly for those members that have got lots of other responsibilities, it does appear that this remote working model does actually offer some other benefits that maybe we hadn't talked about before. The downside of it is that, of course, we've lost our bilingual meetings of council, and that's because the Microsoft product at the moment doesn't enable us to provide a bilingual meeting support arrangement. We have been making inquiries as to when Microsoft are looking to bring that on stream, but at the moment there's no timescale for that to be delivered. So there are discussions that are taking place at the moment, particularly with the Senedd support workers, where they've obviously achieved this, as to how they've achieved it. But it does come with a lot of work and with some quite considerable cost at the moment if we were going to adopt that model. So I didn't want us to not note the fact that we've lost our Welsh council, our bilingual council meetings then, Chair, because I think we do need to note that. And I think hopefully we'll see some developments for Wales as a whole over the coming months. But I think we do need to keep an eye on that and return to that probably at the turn of the year if we're not seeing the progress that we'd like to see made with the Microsoft product. Just on the public participation then, as Stacey said, I think we've done some easy things which have cost us no money in relation to promoting the fact that we're holding these meetings and explaining to people how they can come along and view what's happening for, in live time, but also in terms of viewing the recordings that we've been making. What we're proposing in the report is that we make some progress as well over the next couple of months on some of the other elements we've talked about before. So one of those is about exploring the petitioning functionality within the Modern Gov software, because that's technology that we've got, and we could trial that internally to understand how it works and to see then how we would move that forward if we are required to do that as a result of the new legal duties that are contained within the bill. And then the other point was a point that Councillor Percy made some time ago, which is about how navigable our web pages are. So some work has been done in the background around that, but I think that's another area really where there's some quick wins to be had there about just simplifying how people find out about the democratic process, and then making sure then we're promoting that and encouraging people to use it. So there are some ideas in the report about things that we can progress even while we're in this very strange set of circumstances, accepting that we are back in a response mode at the moment, so we might find ourselves able to make quicker progress some weeks than others depending on what's happening around us in terms of the emergency response we've still got to keep our focus on. So hopefully this afternoon is an update for members about where we've been. We've probably exceeded our expectations in one respect, but actually we've lost our Welsh language element. But I do think that there is still scope for us to make progress over the coming months on some of the public participation measures, because it'll mean that we're not coming at it from a standing start when the legal duties come into force.
Thanks very much, Karen. Thank you, Diolch. I've got a number of members indicating now. Can I just reflect personally quickly that back, it seems like not much less than a year ago, we started looking, Stacey and I took a lot of time to look at other organizations and how they were webcasting, and I visited the Chamber in Haverfordwest and so on. So you know, we're reflecting on all of that. That at the time was exciting and it was interesting, but it was also presenting huge question marks in terms of budget. Since then, the COVID-19 pandemic has thrown us into total disarray in one regard, but we've sort of made good progress, I believe, with regard to IT and the remote working. And ironically, incredibly, we've spent a lot less money doing this than we would have been spending implementing the original plans. So I mean, I think we need to reflect on that as well a little bit going forward. On page 104 somewhere it says about future potential hybrid meetings where you have some members in the chamber, other members working remotely. So I think that needs to be added to the mix as well. But anyway, let's see what you have to say, colleagues. I've seen them in this order. So Steve Hunt, Mike Harvey, CL, is that you, Ted Latham, I think, and Sean Percy. So Steve. Oh, Alan, so, CL, sorry. There's a way CL. Right, sorry. So first of all, I am Steve Hunt, please. Mute.
I've got to get used to this new layout. Sorry, Chair. I think most people would want me muted anyway. I see Mike Harvey laughing at me. So, yeah, thank you, Chair. I can't disagree with what Karen has said in her comments there. I just wanted to, this is a recommendation for council, and good progress certainly has been made. And the points you raised, Chair, I agree with. But what I want to do is, that again was brought up in chairs and vice chairs, in respect to if we still have to work with the Welsh Government, and I know we're in COVID-19 and the finances are being stretched, but we can still ask for support financially if possible, because what I'm getting to, Karen, is that while the Chair mentioned it's gone really well and maybe saved us money, the technology is still a little bit iffy. I'm not going to suggest it's as bad as it might be, but there's going to be times, and I know members, cabinet members, everybody has had an issue. If we highlight that, if they really want to bring this forward and you know, the establishing a petition and arrangement and everything else, we need to be focused that everything goes on. You're never going to get it perfect. I appreciate that, but there's been a lot of issues recently, quite embarrassing really in some of our meetings, and so I think they need to tell us what to do, but support it with financial contributions. We really need to get that home to them. So I'm not going into detail on the paper here, because I agree with it really, and with what you said and with what the Chair has said. But I just want to make that point. We got to tell Welsh Government, back up what you want us to do with your support financially and in other ways. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Can I bring in Councillor Mike Harvey now? Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's quite heartening to see the viewing figures on page 100 for people viewing the meetings remotely. I don't think we'd ever have 160, 190 people in the gallery watching a meeting. So I think it is the way forward. I think, Chair, you mentioned hybrid meetings, perhaps having some people at home on the laptop and others in the council chamber. That would be interesting how you would chair that. But again, some people can't get to meetings, perhaps if there's a road accident or whatever, so maybe hybrid meetings, then you'd have attendance. And I think, if it helps people to attend meetings by having hybrid meetings, then that's the way to go. And I say that's an interesting one and something to look forward, to the future, really. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I mean, the investigations into the options for that will continue, I'm sure. One option seems obvious to me is that even if members are in the chamber, they can still be using their laptops or iPads and contributing. So we see the same visuals sort of scene that we're looking at now. But obviously there will be other implications of being in the chamber. Anyway, I'll leave that hang in the air for a minute. So nesa, Councillor Alun Llywelyn, welcome there.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Yes, I agree with everything that's been said in Karen's preamble and the other contributions. And I think, well, I've always been, enthusiastic for these technological developments in theory. In practice, I've always been a bit of a Luddite, but like everybody else, I've been catapulted in the past 6 months into, learning all these new skills and getting used to new ways of working. And although I wouldn't want to see all meetings permanently replaced with remote meetings, there are disadvantages as well as advantages. I think there are some aspects of this work that we will never go back on. Some meetings where we won't be travelling, in my case, 13 miles to get to the civic centre in Talbot and going back again for a fairly short meeting when this can be done online. So I think there's more exciting developments to come. Just a quick note on the issue of bilingualism. I know in one of the meetings of the Swansea Bay Regional Committee recently, Regional Scrutiny Committee recently, it was mentioned, I think, yes, it was the Carmarthenshire members, that they had, as a temporary measure, because Microsoft hadn't developed the permanent software, some form of phone arrangement. Now, I didn't quite catch how it was supposed to work, and it sounds like it hasn't been without its problems, because apart from anything else, one of the members pointed out that members were being charged for the phone calls, which I don't think is something that we'd want to encourage, and that was a glitch which wasn't immediately apparent when the system, apparently. So but Charlotte was in that meeting, I think, from Democratic Services. I think it was Charlotte that was looking after the meeting from our Democratic Services. So Karen, I don't know, she might have picked up perhaps a bit better than I did what the suggestion was. I'd say it may not be a practical step, and it might be better that we keep on tying in with Welsh Government on Microsoft, but it's worth seeing perhaps if Charlotte can recall what was actually said there, or perhaps some of her colleagues who also monitored the meeting from Carmarthenshire Democratic Services would be able to enlighten us. Thanks.
Diolch yn fawr, Ryan, thank you. I can see two hands at the minute, Councillor Percy and Councillor Richards. If there's anyone else there, please can you put your name in the chat. Sean next, please. Sean Percy.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this is really interesting, I guess. We've made very little progress and lots of progress at the same time, which is it's peculiar. I think obviously one of the benefits in that is we've all kind of started to get used to this idea that meetings are being recorded and can be reviewed back, and we've perhaps got to learn some of the etiquette and everything else that goes with that. Perhaps some of us are still working on that, but it's all a bit of a learning curve and a journey. I'm wondering, with regards to the situation we're in now and the arrangements we've got for recording and uploading meetings afterwards, have we given any consideration to using Microsoft Teams Live to broadcast the meetings live as they take place? I know other councils have done that. It just strikes me as a way that might further engage members of the public. I think people during the pandemic have got used to these sort of live briefings and this idea of watching something with immediacy as it's happening, and I feel we are missing a trick on that front by not broadcasting live. It's sometimes a bit difficult because I don't really know when the meetings will come up on YouTube, so I can't often sort of say, well, today I'm in planning committee, if you want to watch, keep an eye out over the next week. It doesn't really work as well as it would live. So I'm wondering about that. And just a general comment on the other democratic engagement proposals, particularly the petitions. I'd just be really interested to kind of follow that as we look about how we can implement that. I think that's going to be something that the public will really embrace. We do see petitions come to us anyway, and it's a format that again the public have been exposed to with the UK government and Welsh government and others. So I think we've got you talk about quick wins. It's something that the public are already used to, and I think we would really appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. I'll bring the officers can come back in at the end, but Councillor Anthony Richards has his hand up. Anthony, do you want to be on?
Yeah, great. Diolch, Cadeirydd. Yeah, I absolutely agree with all the points that have been made, you know, from Karen's points at the beginning. And I know Sean has mentioned a lot of the points that I was going to say, especially with regards to the live broadcasting. I absolutely agree. And, you know, we had a meeting last week or the week before, and it was about 5 days later that the broadcast was put up. Well, there's good and bad to that, in one sense that people's emotions can be quite high at the time, so they want to see it straight away. And but also I think it would have put some people's minds at rest with what, you know, in fairness, what lot was said in that meeting, from councillors fighting on their behalf, but also the clarity from officers as well. So there's this twofold in this. So but I've noticed, you know, the numbers are not as high as what they probably would have been had it have gone out sort of almost instantaneously, or at least, you know, sort of a day, a day later. But I agree with Sean, it can be sometimes difficult to say, look, I have spoken on your behalf and the meeting should be coming out in, you know, I don't really know when, but I'll be in touch with you. I also agree in terms of the petitions, and I'm glad that Karen raised that, because I think it does give us an opportunity to try and strengthen local democracy. It tries to strengthen, get people's opinions, you know, to be heard. You know, sometimes people sign a petition and they don't really read into that. But again, with the transparency of it being debated and being shown to the public, then at least people can see you know, what their representatives are raising on their behalf, and also the clarity can come back, because we're all aware that sometimes, you know, I've definitely found it beneficial to watch back some of the meetings, because sometimes you're in the, you know, you're in the midst of it and you're there, you know, trying to ask those questions and you don't always hear, or you think you've heard something, and being able to listen back has definitely helped in that sense. So I think it will be really a good option to be held accountable to the public, but also to give them the opportunity to put their strength of feeling through a petition. And like Sean said, used to that process now, so I definitely support that. And then my last point again is just to support the use of the hybrid meetings, or the remote meetings as they've been. It's definitely been helpful to me as somebody who works you know, full time and tries to juggle, you know, my council work and my work as well, because a lot of the time, you know, you're on trying to get to Talbot, you're on a bottleneck traffic, you're, you know, spending so much time sometimes on the road rather than in the meeting for sometimes a 20-minute meeting, and yet if we don't turn up, it'll affect our attendance rates. So I think that's definitely something that we need to look at. And with that, if we can manage to get this hybrid way of working, help local people who understand their communities, women especially who have childcare, you know, are trying to bring up a family, if they can log on from home. I know it has its difficulties to try and be in a meeting, but it is a lot easier doing it that way than trying to get childcare cover. So I think it would definitely support people, disable people, so that they don't have to travel, and people who haven't got any mode of transport. It will allow those to want to be or want to stand for office, because the opportunities will be far greater for them if we can find a way of being able to have that remote working. So I endorse, everything that's been said, trying to improve that.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Anthony. Can I bring in Stacey Curran at the moment, please?
Thanks, Chair. Just an immediate response, really, on the timings for uploading the meetings. We aim to get them up on the same working day. We have had issues with glitches because they've been uploaded to YouTube. So I think the one you might be referring to last week was a particular issue with a YouTube clash. I can't pretend to know much more than that technically, but we aim to get them up the same working day, and that is the target that we work to. So if you want to make that to look for the same day, as long as there's no extenuating circumstances with YouTube, you should be able to see it that day. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Stacey. Can I just, I'll bring Karen in now next, but can I just ask, and perhaps Karen can respond to this. We have held a lot of meetings now online, and they are available to members of the public. I was under the impression, perhaps I was wrong, that some of those were actually available live to members of the public, because we do ask, I asked today if there were any members of the public present, and they weren't. Planning meetings in particular, where members of the public have rights of audience already. I know I participated in at least one meeting where there was a member of the public present. So, Karen, can you just summarise where we are in terms of how much of our feed is actually live for the members of the public?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. We looked at Microsoft Live actually right at the beginning of the remote working technology, and there's a little bit more work around the back end of it, to be honest with you, than you get when you're just recording off a normal Teams meeting. And because it was very, very new and we wanted to make sure the meetings were going to go smoothly, we decided against going down the Microsoft Live route initially, because we were all learning it. And so there's no other reason than that, Chair. The arrangements at the moment are that we proactively advertise the fact that we've got online meetings taking place, and the members of the public are given a link and contact details for Democratic Services to indicate if they actually want to view the meeting live. So if people want to view the live meeting, so in the case of the meeting that perhaps Councillor Percy was referred to, if the person was available for that, they could have viewed that meeting live at the time. They would be in the public gallery for it. But what we are doing is that we are not streaming it to the internet live. What we're doing is we're recording it and then uploading it to the internet and basically putting it on YouTube. In summary, that's kind of what we're doing at the moment. Now, there's no reason why we can't explore moving to live streaming of the meetings. And when you think about it, and now that we've got plenty of experience under our belt, there'll be absolutely no difference, will there really? The only difference is that the recording is available in live time rather than sometime later than when the meeting finishes. So if the committee's view is that they would like us to explore that, we can take that forward as an action from today's meeting. Even though the cost of the technology hasn't been as significant on webcasting to what we were looking at previously with Public Eye, what is happening is this is having quite a significant impact on staff time. So the amount of work that's required for Democratic Services now to set these meetings up, to make sure during the meeting that people are still connected and able to participate in the meetings, and the impact on IT is far more considerable than when we meet in face-to-face. So, there is an overhead around these meetings, and I wouldn't pretend that there isn't. So, yes, we haven't spent, all the money on the software and the hardware that we thought we were going to have to buy, but it has impact on staff time. And of course, we haven't stood up all of the meeting cycle yet. We're still only standing up part of the meeting cycle. So, as I say, perhaps you can indicate to me at the end, Chair, if you would like us to explore Microsoft Live. We've got the technology, so there isn't a cost to that. It's just about us learning it and changing some of the meeting preparations and the support arrangements during the meeting to enable that now to take place. Just coming back then on the points that were raised during the debate, in terms of the financial support, which is a point that Councillor Hunt was raising, we did raise with the Welsh Government back many months ago now that there would be a cost accompanying with these new duties, and we are continuing to work with WLGA about the cost that comes with this, and we are hoping that there will be some additional financial settlement around the new duties around this area of work. I'm not sure that the Welsh Government still fully appreciate the impact on staff time around doing all of this. Their focus to date has been very much on the technology costs. So we still need to be working with WLGA to give the evidence around the staff implications of this. So that is definitely something that is in hand. On the issue of Welsh, certainly we'll follow up what Carmarthenshire have been doing with their members. But I guess there's kind of a bit of a debate here as well, isn't there? Because on the one hand, we can arrange translation, say, for Welsh-speaking members who wish to have the meeting relayed to them in Welsh, and for their views to come back the other way. That would be very much about servicing the individual needs of members. But the whole point of the Welsh Language Act is also about making Welsh visible. So I think, one of the things that struck me is if we can solve this very, very quickly, there's nothing stopping Welsh-speaking members speaking in Welsh, as long as they would be prepared to then explain what they've said in English. So that could be something that we could do as a matter of protocol, for certain meetings. I don't know, Chair, perhaps that is something that we could take away and just give some thought to that. And we'll certainly find out what Carmarthenshire are doing to feed into that discussion. Petitions, yeah, I mean, I think the view seems to be from the committee, go ahead and explore that. So we'll put a bit of a plan of work around that, and we can come back to you in the next meeting and let you know a bit more about how that would all potentially work. And just thinking, I think those were all the points that I picked up, Chair. If there's anything I've missed, please by all means come back to me.
Thank you very much, Karen. I'm not seeing any hands at the minute. I've just picked up a few points myself from that summary from Karen. Then members, eventually we're going to look at page 107 for the recommendations. I think Karen offered that we could add to the recommendations an exploration of how we look at live streaming rather than relying on the recording. I mean, there are implications of staffing time and expertise and learning curves and so on. Of course, if we are live streaming, then it will be different to what is now the case, which is by request, isn't it? And if we don't get any requests, then at least maybe staff wouldn't have to bother with servicing those. So there's pluses and minuses, I guess. So perhaps we can add that to the list in the recommendations. The other thing I would ask if we could add to the list is that bullet point about how we consider servicing the Welsh language aspect in the time being, for the time being, because Microsoft apparently won't come up with a solution in anytime soon. So perhaps we could add those two. I'm looking out, colleagues. There's nobody else with the hands or any messages in the chat. So I take it we're ready to go to recommendations on page 107. So you can see the recommendations 1, 2, 3, and the third one has the bullet points for the ongoing programme. So the petitioning arrangement, the rights of audience for certain meetings, so we have that for planning, but this is for our general meetings. Improvements to the democracy pages on the website. I think that's something that rolled forward from previous discussions of this committee or the Task and Finish group. And then the explanation of the forward work programme to members of the public. So could we add in, Karen and Stacey, to those bullet points, the 2 points about the live streaming and the way we look at servicing the Welsh language aspect? Are members happy with that? Okay, so if I take that as the general motion, are we happy? Nobody's against or abstaining? No, I have no indication, so that's carried. Okay, thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr iawn, pawb. Right, the next item is item 6, Democratic Services Team Structure, pages 111 to 118. So Karen Jones, please introduce that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think members will be aware that our Senior Committee Services Manager has now retired. And rather than fill in that role on a like-for-like basis, what I've done is combine the 2 senior roles within the team into the role that Stacey's been appointed to. So what this report is doing is updating the structure to reflect that change. And the proposal is not to replace that senior committee member role, instead to create the grade 7 role. And you'll have seen in there that what we're doing at the moment is we're planning to fill some of the roles that are vacant within the structure, but not all of them. And that's because we've got the new duties that we've just been discussing, Chair, and the implications of this change in technology that we need to work through. And what we don't want to do is to appoint people with the wrong skill set. So we need to have enough resilience in the structure for the time being. So we'll fill the jobs that we need to fill, but we'll then review the structure again when we're a little bit clearer about what the longer term support arrangements are going to look like. Because in addition to what we discussed on the call this afternoon, we are going to have these corporate joint committees as well established under the Local Government Reform Act. And it's not entirely clear at the moment what the support arrangements are going to look like around all of that either. So it's my responsibility to advise you on the resources for democratic services, which is why I'm bringing it to committee today, and hopefully members will be happy to support it.
Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you. So members, you see the report. The recommendation is that we endorse the proposed structure in Appendix 2. I don't see any questions or comments coming in, so all happy to accept that. Diolch yn fawr iawn, thank you. Okay, the next item, item 7, is the forward work programme. Discussion on the forward work programme. This is starting on page 119. Members can see that the dates on the left, we are starting on today's meeting, the 2nd of November, and then it rolls on to the January meeting, the March meeting, with the topics that are proposed to be included. Before I know that Craig wants to come in with Craig Griffiths with an additional point, but can I ask members first of all for their input into, if you have any input into this particular topic? I can see Councillor Alun Llywelyn. Alun, Daddy.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Thanks, Chair. And if I'm raising this in the wrong context, then please let me know. But I know one of the items that we have planned for the January meeting is establishing terms of reference for the review of the Constitution, which is something obviously that we're charged with doing periodically as the Democratic Services Committee. But obviously at the moment, we've touched on this in the previous discussion, we are working with a version of the Constitution that's been limited by the particular circumstances. We've got various regulations coming from Welsh Government about the way that we're expected to do our work, and particularly the way in which we hold meetings. And I know a question that I've raised, Karen is familiar with the question, is about how we see the role of scrutiny committees, and I think this has been discussed a bit at chairs and vice chairs as well, and there are members here this afternoon that are part of that grouping, so perhaps they would have information. But we're currently running without a full slate of scrutiny meetings. We do have cabinet scrutiny meetings, we do have periodic regulatory meetings, and recently we had an ad hoc meeting of the education scrutiny to do with school reorganisation proposals. My concern is that as the period extends, that this leaves us with something of a democratic deficit, because we have members that are part of scrutiny meetings which aren't actually meeting. I'm sure they're keeping an eye on the urgency actions. I'm sure they're following the agenda of cabinet scrutiny if it affects what they would normally look at in their own subject scrutiny meetings. And I realise these have been emergency measures, but as we are possibly going into a full year of this situation or beyond, I think that we do need to consider how we can reintroduce the scrutiny function, even if we streamline the agendas so that we don't clutter them up over much. But anyway, there's a point which, if I'm raising in the wrong spot, I apologise. But I think it's something that we need to consider in some shape or form.
Diolch, Alun. I'll bring in Craig Griffiths in a while to talk about the Constitution, Before that, Karen, do you want to respond in terms of the scrutiny meetings?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I know that I'm familiar with the point that Councillor Llewellyn has raised, and very recently we've had a letter as well from the Minister asking questions about scrutiny arrangements across all councils in Wales. What I was able to do when I was responding to that letter was just really to reflect on what we've done, I suppose, since the COVID outbreak. So if we think about what we've done so far, we quickly put in place the electronic version of the urgency action procedure at that point in time where it was not possible to call meetings because we didn't have the legal framework to do that. And these chairs and vice chairs of scrutiny have been involved in that process from the start. That's not the case necessarily across Wales. So I think we made some good strides initially along the way in which we were being required to work then. When throughout that period, as you know, we've tried to keep members updated with bulletins. We've had the briefings, I know, with the leader and opposition group leaders and those kind of things. But when we got to July, June time, I think we were the first local authority in Wales to stand up a meeting of the full council, and we had a round of all the scrutiny committees before the August recess, just to air the report that I wrote on moving forward, which was summarising what we had done so far in the pandemic, but also outlining the framework to go forward. So I think we had the one round of scrutiny committees before the summer break. What we'd hoped to do was to actually start the scrutiny committees meeting from September onwards. And we said we'd start that with the scrutiny committees meeting in a workshop format to look at the areas that they wanted to focus on. And I think because we didn't have the meetings in the meeting cycle, it took the committee section longer to arrange those workshops than we would have liked. So there's been a lag, Councillor Llewellyn, which I fully accept, in being able to get the scrutiny committees back up and running, albeit they're going to need to meet on a slightly different footing because of the circumstances that we currently find ourselves in. So just in terms of thinking about where we are today, there is a cycle of meetings that's been scheduled before Christmas for every scrutiny committee. And there are, I think, 3 meetings that are being scheduled for after Christmas. Each scrutiny committee has identified the topics that they want to focus on. So the agendas for those meetings will be very much focused on what the scrutiny committees themselves have identified. But what's also really important to remember as well is the forward work programme, which is setting out the decisions the Cabinet are expecting to take are looked at within those committees. And, the onus is on the committee really to be identifying what they want to be looking at in terms of pre-decision scrutiny, because we're not standing up all the Cabinet boards at the moment because of the overall workloads and capacity issues that we've got. So, members of scrutiny committees will know what that forward work programme is, and they need to be really just thinking about that as they design the agendas for their individual scrutiny committees. Just to put another level of assurance around it as well then, when we've seen that there have been major decisions taken on services, so for example, the decisions we took on the MREC over recent months, the decisions we've taken to go out to consult on the new schools up in the Swansea Valley area, we've given advice that those meetings should be joint between the Cabinet Scrutiny Committee and the Subject Committee. So we've done that to make sure that the Scrutiny Committee members are not disenfranchised. So it's going to be a slightly different model, I think, in the short term, given that we've got quite a lot of work, to be honest with you, with service pressures at the moment, given the way in which the pandemic is behaving. There are quite some significant pressures around health and social care system at the moment. But what we're also experiencing is quite a lot of impact from the way in which the self-isolation is working on the capacity within services. So because there are more people testing positive in the community, for example, if any of our staff are being exposed to that, then we've got staff being told to self-isolate for 10, 14 days, and that is actually reducing our capacity. So what we try to do is to get the right balance between standing the scrutiny committees back up, because as you say, what we don't want going forward is a whole group of people in the council feeling disenfranchised. And there are some important decisions being made, and it's important that they are scrutinised, in a robust way. So I'd be interested to have the views of the scrutiny committees, maybe after we go through the next round between now and Christmas, And more than happy in the new year, if you thought it was appropriate for us to maybe give the, all members of council an opportunity to give us some feedback on the proposed model for Christmas onwards. Because as you say, I think we're probably going to be in this position for the best part of this civic year now. And we need to make sure we get a balance right between, not overloading the system with, administrative workloads that are actually going to stop us perhaps dealing with some of the very pressing operational priorities that we've got. So I hope that gives you a bit of a comfort that we have done something about what you've said. And then let's have a look in the new year about whether we're happy to continue with our model or whether we think there's a need to further shape it.
Thank you, Karen. Alan,
Yeah.
General?
Yeah, just very briefly, Chair. Thanks for that reply. And I realise just how incredibly difficult the whole situation is, and also the particular time pressures put on officers' teams, and certainly I wouldn't want officers to be tied up in doing unnecessary reports, or members either for that matter. I mean, there's been something nice about not having 300-page reports every now and again coming through our inboxes all the time, so perhaps some streamlining doesn't go amiss anyway. But I realise it is it is by definition unprecedented, but I didn't want us to lose sight of the issue either in terms of democratic overview. Thanks.
Ryan. Thank you. I don't see any other members indicating at the moment, so can I bring in Craig Griffiths, please, in relation to the Constitution and so on?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just to give members an update as to what I also meant then by a review of the Constitution. So as monitoring officer, it's one of my responsibilities to make sure that our Constitution is kept up to date and covers then all the legal basis that we need to for any decision making within the Council. But also as well, during the course of the next 6 to 12 months, I'm anticipating we're going to see some new changes that are going to come out from Welsh Government's Local Government and Elections Wales Bill, which will have to then reflect into the Constitution. So over the last couple of months, my right bedtime reading, shall we say, has been to update the Constitution and to try and sort of reflect some of the newer provisions that I would like to see included and where we can tie up some loose ends in that regard. So I'm going to be asking full council in December to task a role to the Democratic Services Committee, and we can work out then the logistics will be the best way to do this then in the new year as to whether any members would like to sit on this task and finish group or whatever it would be to look at the Constitution. I would try and make it as interesting as I can. I apologise, it is probably going to be quite a dry couple of sessions in that sense, but hopefully we can try and find some new ways. There's a couple of different options ultimately we can consider, which we can then report back to full council on to decide then whether they wish to adopt. So it will just be a systematic review of some of the key elements of the Constitution, just to confirm it reflects our current requirements as council, and obviously then we'll hopefully as well make it much more user friendly to the general public, so they will be able to see how decision making takes place and obviously then the processes that the council follows when we need to have various meetings and such. So thank you, Chair.
Craig, thank you. Members, you heard what Craig said about setting up a small group. I wasn't sure before today's meeting whether that it was the intention to set that up now or whether you're looking to set it up by the next meeting. It sounds as if it's the latter. So members, you've heard what, those of you who are still with us, you've heard what Craig said. If you want to rush forward and put yourself in the hat for the for the working group, then please email and we'll see what we can do for you. Okay, thank you. Well, if you're all happy to accept the work programme as it is and as it evolves, yes, because I think it's an ever rolling forward programme, then we're now on to the last item, item 8, which is urgent items. Happy to say there aren't any urgent items today, and therefore that brings us to conclusion, and I'm in a position to close the meeting formally. So diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd am eich cyfraniad. Thank you all very much for your contributions.